Rustin is here we are. It must be like Oscar season or something. There's so many biopics around, but Rustin is a biopic. But I think like if there's one good thing that's happened in the biopic area is that people have stopped trying to give you cradle to grave biopics where they go through a person's whole life, and they've more or less sort of focused on events. And this is pretty much like a this is pretty much a it's pretty much a biopic of the march that happened in Washington that led to Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" speech. It's pretty much a biopic of that, but it focuses on a character called Bayard Rustin, who I had never heard about before, who was essentially the person who came up with the idea of the march and did everything to make this march happen. Because it's one of those things where I remember, you hear about Martin Luther King going, "I have a dream today," and just think, yeah. I look at the fact that there's hundreds of thousands of people in the center of Washington, and you just take it as read that, yeah, that happens. And it's not until probably with me, you grow older, you move to like England or something like that, and you start thinking, hang on a second, the admin, how did they get all those people in there? How did they get all those people in there without, like, the powers that be thinking that there was about to be a mob thing happening, and without them bringing out tanks? And how did that not become a bloodbath? Essentially. And this film talks all about Rustin and how Rustin went about making sure that this actually happened. But it also points out the fact that Rustin was a black gay man living in the, I think it was 50s, 60s. And so he's kind of almost been brushed under the carpet, and he's kind of like been put out of history. And even in the film itself, you have all these different factions of Black America. You have the NAACP. You have all these other groups that I had never heard of. I did not even know existed. There was one called like SNCC or something like that. And they keep showing you all the different heads of them and how they're also jostling for position. And some of them are like, allied with Kennedy's administration. So they're just trying to protect their position. And some people are saying we shouldn't do this march because if we do this march, it is going to be seen as an aggression thing. Kennedy's trying to do something diplomatic. This will be seen as trying to undermine him. And all these different factions that went into that were trying to just before this could actually happen. What could happen? What his relationship was like with Martin Luther King. How it wasn't all cut and dry and it wasn't all heroism. And that I really, really enjoyed because I was like, okay, now this is great. This is going through. This film almost goes through. This is the boring backroom stuff that needs to happen for change to happen. And what Rustin actually had to go through for change to happen, and the fact that even though he's pretty much like what happened is that this film was produced by the Obamas, and the Obamas they gave Bayard Rustin the Congressional Medal of Freedom, even though he died years before they ever got into office. And I think that's because because I think he was a real influence to Obama with Obama's activism before he became president, and they think this guy's he's been wiped out of history. And even in the film, in the run-up to the March on Washington, there's people trying to wipe him out because he's gay. There are people just trying to push him out of there. And they're saying things like, you have Jeffrey Wright. Jeffrey Wright shows up for pretty much one scene in this film. And I think it is a vindication of getting a good actor to not do much time-wise in the film. Because in that one scene, he just communicates everything about this character who is saying like, well, we've done a lot of good work here, and this is after everything had already been organized. But if there was one person here who had like, certain predilections that you think would like, ruin the point you're trying to make, would you allow that person to come onto the march, and would you allow that person to be in Washington with you? And all the way you see all these different fights that Rustin is fighting, and all the time not losing sight of his activism. And Coleman Domingo, who plays him, is great. It sent me down to go find out more about Rustin and what he did and everything. I thought it was great. But Holly, you talk. I'll take a breath.
I thought it was an absolutely beautiful film and really interesting. I hadn't known about him beforehand, and I found it very interesting seeing his internal battles with his own identity, his simultaneous acceptance and battles with his own identity as a gay black man in the time period, and how he also didn't wish to be defined by he simultaneously, I think, almost wanted to be defined, didn't want to be defined. I know that's, completely contradictory, two sentences, but there was a sort of conflict in himself in whom he was attracted to and how he felt about himself that was very interesting.
Yeah.
So he didn't just look at the fascinating, position on civil rights. You looked at the fascinating position of somebody who is a brilliant and flawed individual who is battling their own demons.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, and I think it captured him beautifully and really, it sort of it was a sort of gives you shivers film in places. I think if I remember rightly, I got a bit damp eyed towards the end, but of course, as you know, I cry at everything, so that's not that much of a statement about anything. But the emotion of it really got to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I find it quite inspiring. I'm gonna be, as somebody,
Yeah,
yeah, as somebody who has this long held thing of I want to change a country. In my case, Nigeria. I wanted to figure a way of making that country be what could actually be, and I found it inspiring. But like and I think that, but at the same time, I almost kind of like, how do you actually go about doing it? And I found it quite interesting that I saw something else that was talking about the film earlier today that sort of said, oh, that the film did like the March on Washington doesn't really play that big a part, and it's like, and it is they pretty much only show the final line of Martin Luther King's speech in there, but I thought that's because that wasn't the point.
yeah,
For me, I thought it wasn't the point. The point wasn't about we're going to try and recreate this whole thing because, quite frankly, you can't. You cannot recreate that speech. You cannot recreate that moment. But it was about it for me. It was about everything that he had to do up to
yes,
that point. And once they go into Washington, it's like, okay, it's been done. We've won. We've won, and the speech, not the point. The thing, not the point. It was about the unheralded, uncelebrated legwork that just happens, that needs to happen to get to that point in the first place.
yeah,
And even the way the film ends, where there's a scene right at the end of the film where people get invited to go meet the president, and Rustin's reaction to it, which I'm looking at, and I'm going, they that must have been true. That must actually have happened. Rustin's reaction to being invited to go speak to the president is kind of one of those things where you go, "Ooh, if that happened, this guy was a one-off. This guy was and we need more people like him." So I really liked it. I would give it a 4 out of 5.
and I'm going to go 5 out of 5.
Oh, I knew it.
I always go one up on you.
I knew it.